everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1-0 podcast. As you can see, we're back in person now. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Lyle Alenstein.
And I'm Lexie Linderman.
Today, we're going to preview Penn State's season opener against West Virginia in Morgantown. So to start it off, what are your guys' initial thoughts on the matchup?
I think just looking at the matchup on paper, it's clear that Penn State is a better team. They obviously have more talent, but I think it's only 8.5 points spread. I think it's so close just because Penn State's bringing in 3 new coordinators, a new offense under Andy Kotelnicki, a new defense under Tom Allen, and no one really knows exactly what it's going to look like. I mean, we've heard things in pressers. We kind of have our ideas, but we don't know for sure like what it's going to look like, and so I think that's where that's like kind of up in the air, and where West Virginia, people think West Virginia could sneak in and come away with the upset victory. But yeah, so that's just kind of what I've been thinking, like looking at the matchup.
I think obviously this is going to be a tough environment for Penn State to walk into for week one. Obviously Morgantown, it's got a pretty crazy environment, that energy in Millen-Pusker. It's going to be bumping. And then you've got Big noon kickoff to start it off. That's going to get the crowd fired up. You got Pat McAfee there, Machine Gun Kelly, performing. But I think another thing that's going to be a factor is the weather. I mean, I don't think you guys believe me, but the thunderstorms and rain.
It's not going to rain.
Look, when we're filming on the field post-game reaction wearing ponchos, I will get back to you there. But I just, they're doing wet ball drills during practice. Obviously, Riley Thompson, he talked about practicing punting with a wet ball as well. So I think that's going to be a factor also. But then from just like a game planning perspective for Penn State, I think the only real way West Virginia pulls this one out is through the ground. Garrett Green, obviously, is a very mobile quarterback. They've got Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson, both. That's a really good running back tandem that I think they combined for 15 touchdowns last year. And then, obviously Penn State's defensive line is arguably the best aspect of its team, with between Abdul Carter and Dennis Sutton on the edges. Then you've got that really experienced defensive tackle group. So I think that's the matchup to look for when we get there.
Yeah. I really feel like the West Virginia fans and just the West Virginia program as a whole are kind of making this like their Super Bowl game. I mean, they've had big games recently with Texas and Oklahoma coming in every couple of years. But in terms of non-conference games, I was going back through, and I don't think they've had a big non-conference game at Millen-Pusker since Notre Dame in 2000, I think, was the last one I saw. So I think they're definitely getting really into this game. I know their fans are very confident on Twitter. I don't know how much you guys have interacted with them, but it's been a real pleasant experience getting to meet all their fans on Twitter. Every time I post a video of Drew Allard, there's like 20 Mountaineer fans like commenting about how bad he is or how bad he looks, and I don't know where they come from, but they've got like Drew Allard just like in their search history just popping up all the time. But kind of looking at that spread, Lexie, like you mentioned, it's down to 8.5 now. It's opened at 10.5, so obviously Vegas thinks it's going to be a little bit closer than they initially did.
Because of the rain.
It's not going to rain. It's not going to rain. It's not going to rain. Okay. But regardless, I think just looking at this matchup, breaking it down, again, I think Penn State has the advantage with both coaching staff and roster in terms of talent. So I think the only real advantage West Virginia has in this game is the home field. Like we mentioned, I do think it'll be a loud environment, but again, the game's at noon, so that maybe dulls it down a little bit. I don't know how big of an impact do you guys think that has, and what kind of chance do you give West Virginia in this game?
I don't give them that big of a chance. I mean, obviously the atmosphere is probably going to be crazy just because, we've seen all this stuff on Twitter. It sounds like West Virginia fans are very into this, very excited to have Penn State there, and they're hoping to beat them. But I just don't really see a world in which that happens. I just think Penn State's too dominant. But I do think the crowd is going to play a factor, but I do know, we heard yesterday before practice, they were practicing with loud crowd noise. I think they know what the atmosphere is going to be like, and I think they're ready. They've played in plenty of other big atmospheres. This is just another one for them. It is the season opener, but I think they'll be okay with the atmosphere.
Yeah, obviously the atmosphere is going to be a factor. They were practicing with the crowd noise yesterday, way different than last year when they were practicing against Northwestern with no crowd noise. So that's something to look at. But I really don't see a world where Penn State loses, but I think a lot of people are way too confident that Penn State's just going to have a cakewalk here. West Virginia, obviously, they handled last year at home at Beaver, but they finished the season off really strong. I think 9-3. They won the Duke Duke's Mayo Bowl against North Carolina, so that's obviously a big way to end the season. And they got votes in the AP poll. Obviously, I think they're nationally respected as like that right outside that top 25. That they pull out a few big wins. I genuinely think they're a contender in the Big 12. Obviously, I think Utah and Kansas State are probably the clear cut there, like favorites at the moment. But I think West Virginia is good. I mean, they've got a lot to prove. That offense is really explosive. Defense is where I look at it, and I see a bunch of question marks because they had a lot of transfers come in, a bunch of guys graduate. So I think it's something to look at. I think Penn State still pulls it off, but I don't see a world where it's more than 2 scores.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because, like you mentioned, West Virginia finished the season hot, and I know their fans like to bring that up, and even analysts like to bring that up to say, that this West Virginia team is going to be a lot different than the one that lost 38-15 last year. But you kind of look at the schedule and break down, who those wins came against. I mean, they didn't beat a ranked team during that stretch. They had some really close wins. They only beat Baylor by 3 points. They only beat TCU by 3 points. They only beat Texas Tech by 7 points. They beat a terrible Pitt team by 11 points. And then when they did play a ranked team, Oklahoma, they lost 59-20. So anytime they really matched up against good competition last year, they lost. They also lost to Houston, Oklahoma State, who weren't ranked at the time. But like you mentioned, finish off the season with a win in the Duke's Mayo Bowl big one over North Carolina, 30-10. But North Carolina was sitting Drake May. They were sitting a bunch of their other starters. So, I mean, I would say it's kind of a fraudulent Duke's Mayo Bowl win as far as that goes. So you kind of look at, they did finish with a solid record last season, but again, none of the teams they beat were, I would say, to the caliber of Penn State. So I'm not sure if they're really capable of competing against, even a ranked team, let alone a top 10 team like Penn State. But do you guys think they're able to kind of take that step up and actually be competitive on Saturday?
Well, I think before we get there, I just wanted to touch on what you said before about WVU fans on Twitter. Because another thing, it's not just the fan base, it's the players that are taking it personal. You've seen clips of like Garnett Haas, the Northwestern transfer who plays corner for West Virginia, who's like, yeah, Penn State shows no respects to their opponents, whatever, unless it's Ohio State or Michigan. And he's just like, this guy played for Northwestern for 4 years and like wasn't even that effective over there. And then you've got...
Well, I think Penn State was like 3-0 against Northwestern while he was there, so...
It's just like, and there, I forget it was an offensive line or a defensive line, but they were talking about how like, when they scored that touchdown in like the last 5 seconds last year, how it was like just terrible. I'm like, okay, why aren't you calling a timeout then, like that late in the game? I know Neil Brown said stuff about that last year, but I think that's also been a recurring theme that a lot of the Penn State beat's been asking the players and the coaches about that bulletin board material, and I think they got some good responses. How they like, I know Franklin talked about like filtering it, how like they put stuff up on the screen, like making sure they see it, making sure it's not everything, because obviously all the players on social media and stuff. And KJ Winston talked about how he asked Franklin about it. He's like, do you like know that this stuff is on the board? And then, because it's like they don't really want to see it. Some of the guys that are on social media, but like Franklin's like, we're selective with it. We know what they want to see to give them a little bit of edge going in the game.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the disrespect angle is a little bit interesting to me because, again, Neil Brown was calling timeouts that whole final drive, and if he didn't do that, Penn State would have just ran the clock out and ended the game without the touchdown. You also look at what West Virginia did the drive prior. They score a touchdown. They go for 2. On the 2-point conversion, they tried to do the Chiefs, like, ring around the rosy play. Like, they were doing all sorts of stuff like that when the game was pretty much out of hand. So, I mean, you can say what you want about Penn State, scoring that extra touchdown with 5 seconds left in the game. But, it's not like West Virginia had given up on the game either because they were still scoring a touchdown, going for 2. They went for the onside kick, which set Penn State up with a short field. Then Penn State's backups, it was really just Bo Pribula running between the tackles every play. I mean, if you can't stop, when you know what's coming and you still can't stop it, and it's the entire second-string offense is out there, I don't think you can call that disrespect. Like, maybe just stop Bo from, diving up the middle. But that's just me. But I don't know. I felt like, regardless, I don't think it was a disrespectful move by Penn State. But either way, maybe this year, if it's a little bit closer, maybe they don't have to worry about that. Penn State putting in its backups or running up the score or anything like that if they're actually able to compete this year. I mean, do you believe in the spread? Do you think it'll be a closer game? Do you think West Virginia can compete against those elite teams on the schedule this year?
So I don't know West Virginia's schedule off the top of my head, but you can make the argument that Penn State is the best team that they're going to face because among the Power Four conferences, you can argue either the Big 12 or the ACC is like the least strongest. I would probably lean the ACC just because I'm an ACC hater, but obviously you can Big 12. I think you've got Utah, who I think is the clear-cut favorite right now, and then I think they'll be ranked. I would be shocked if they don't win that division. I think Kansas State could put up a fight. Obviously, West Virginia is respected, and there's no reason why West Virginia can't end with a really strong record. I think just because of their schedule and like the weakness of that conference. So I would say they could compete, but other than really Penn State, I don't think you can really get a fair like gauge of it just because who they end up playing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think honestly, the game against Penn State will say a lot about this West Virginia team. Like if it's a close loss, then it's clear they can't compete. If it's a blowout loss, and obviously still work to do for them. And then if they win, I mean, obviously they can compete with the ranked teams. But so I think it'll just depend. Like obviously, first game season, we always learn a lot about both teams. But I think just seeing how West Virginia plays against Penn State will say a lot about their chances in the Big 12 and all their other matchups going forward.
And you look at the other side of it for Penn State, I don't really want to call West Virginia like a tune-up because I think this is a really tough environment to walk into for an opener. I think it's a really good opponent. But I think this will say a lot because depending on the outcome of the game, I think it'll give us an indication of what it's like with when they play the teams that are not Ohio State, because obviously that's going to be a tough matchup, and I think the Buckeyes obviously have the advantage, but the teams like USC and Wisconsin, the ones that people have circled as like trap games, obviously on paper Penn State should walk away with those games, but I think if they struggle with West Virginia, I think that's an indicator of what it's going to be like against Wisconsin and USC. Obviously, the duration of the season, you could still pick it up, but I think if they comfortably handle West Virginia, I feel like fans should have and like just people that watch college football should like walk into Penn State versus USC, Wisconsin, feeling comfortable that Penn State should have the advantage.
Yeah, and I think it's good for Penn State to open the season against an opponent like West Virginia because it gives them a good opponent to like get their offense and defense rolling against compared to just like if they were starting season against Bowling Green. Like they're obviously going to blow out. And then they like come to West Virginia. And then you come to West Virginia a couple weeks later and you're like, whoa, like this is actually kind of like a decent team. So I think it's good that they're starting with that. So then they will be ready for USC and Wisconsin, who, like Lyle said, they should beat on paper, but you just never know because those are both on the road and everything like that. But yeah, I think it's good for Penn State that they're starting in such a tough environment because it sets the tone for the season.
And you've got the 10-2 like curse, you know, like they could just end up dropping those games because James Franklin likes to go 10-2. So there's also that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely an argument that this is Penn State's toughest schedule under James Franklin. You miss out on Michigan. And you miss out on Oregon, two of the top teams in the Big Ten, but you get Ohio State, and then you get a bunch of those kind of upper, maybe second-tier teams, I would say, with, USC, West Virginia, Wisconsin. I would throw them all in there. Even Washington, potentially. We'll see, what they look like after losing pretty much the entire – I think they only have one starter returning from last year or something. So we'll see what they look like. But, yeah, I think it'll be a pretty tough schedule for Penn State. And like you said, Lexie, I mean, starting with West Virginia kind of gets you ready for that. Going against, a solid opponent, again, receiving votes, not necessarily ranked, but obviously they're kind of on the radar. And everyone knows, the record, how they finished last season. But what do you guys think are the keys to the game for both teams? Like, what do they need to do to be able to win this one?
I think Penn State needs to stop the run game. I think West Virginia needs to really hammer home the run game. I think it's as simple as that. I think, on offense for Penn State, they just need to figure it out. If they want to win the game, even if it's methodical and we don't even see those explosive plays that it's been talked about literally throughout the whole summer, I think it's fine. You grind out a win. That's how you do it. Obviously, everyone's going to probably look at the game, regardless if Penn State wins or not, and view how cool Nicky did and how many plays they got of plus 12 yards, plus 15 yards. But I wouldn't be too concerned about that, honestly, because you've got Cool Nicky for the first time, and then on top of Cool Nicky, you just got all three coordinators meshing. So it's like there's still plenty of kinks to figure out. First time you're throwing on the headsets with each other. Obviously, then the headset technology that's being implemented with the green dot on defense, and then Drew with the helmet. But I think if West Virginia needs to stop Penn State, I don't really think they can, to be honest, with that personnel that they have on defense. I think if Penn State is going to not perform on offense, I think they're going to end up beating themselves.
Yeah, I think, like Lyle said, for Penn State, the key to stopping West Virginia is just to stop the run game. They do that, and they'll be okay on defense. I think the concern with Penn State on offense is that West Virginia is probably just going to try to stop their run game and force Aller to throw. And so that Penn State should make sure that Aller is composed and ready and everything, which I think he is. But yeah, so I think Penn State needs to make sure that they prepare for like the situation where they're going to have to throw a lot more than they would like to.
I think that I agree. West Virginia's got two really good running backs. They've got Garrett Green, who's obviously a mobile quarterback. He had like 750 yards on the ground last year. So obviously a threat with his legs. I think if you're Penn State, the goal is just to stop the run, make them pass on you. And I don't know if West Virginia's capable of doing that. I don't know if they have, any receivers who can really step up and contribute consistently through the passing game. Penn State should have a good secondary despite all the pieces they lost. They still brought in some big transfers who should kind of fill that hole. And I think Penn State should be able to shut down that passing game. So it really just depends on, if they're able to stop the run. They should be able to bottle up West Virginia's offense, kind of stall them out, and win the game. So I think that's what it comes down to. And then on the flip side, I think it's important that Penn State gets its passing game going in this game, just because West Virginia is probably one of the weaker secondaries that Penn State will play all year. So if you can't pass against them, how are you ever going to pass against a team like Ohio State down the line? So you definitely want to see something probably from Drew Aller. I mean, we saw what he did last year, 21 for 29, 325 yards and 3 scores, no interceptions. So obviously you're looking for kind of a similar stat line this year. Again, it's a hostile environment. That probably plays a factor, makes it a little bit more difficult, especially in the passing game. It's a little bit harder playing in that kind of environment. And if it rains, as Lyle's predicting, that might make it a little bit more difficult for Penn State to pass. So if it does rain, that might play into West Virginia's favor a little bit, I think, just because they like to keep the ball on the ground. But again, if West Virginia goes behind early, I don't think they're capable of coming back. I don't think they have the passing attack to really overcome a deficit if they go down early. So I think the key for Penn State is to get off to a fast start. All right, so we'll close it out with our score predictions for the game. I've got Penn State coming out on top, 34-21, covering the spread. What do you guys have?
I got Penn State getting the W, 23-14. They keep it in that 2-score range, West Virginia does, but I think it's going to be a grinded out game on both sides.
I've got Penn State winning 27-14. I think they get off to a pretty fast start. I think honestly the first quarter is going to be slow for both teams, but then after that I think Penn State just kind of runs away with it. West Virginia is just playing keep up the whole time, and Penn State's going to win by a good amount of points.
All right, you heard it here first. Penn State will win the game. No point even watching. That's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for watching the 1-0 podcast. For more football coverage, you can find us at psucollegian.com and follow us on socials. See you.